When Liu Laoliu walked into the police station to report his missing brother, he never imagined he'd vanish just 2 days later, leaving the police as the last people to ever see him alive. What began as a quiet man's disappearance would soon unravel into one of Heilongjiang's darkest secrets: a village doctor, a hidden cellar, and bodies buried beneath years of silence. 20 years prior, Xiuyun had been divorced and living alone ever since. While most didn't seem to care too much for Xiuyun's disappearance, there were still a select few who found it odd. Xiuyun for a long time had been unemployed, and not many employers in the village were willing to hire him at his age. And when he finally was hired to be a cook for the construction workers, it was a very recent hire. In fact, his first day on the job was April 24th, so it seemed odd that he would abandon his first real job. And eventually, someone asked his family about him, and his brother, 46-year-old Liu Laoliu, was the first to hear about his disappearance. Laoliu started by looking for Xiuyun in areas where he was known to spend his spare time. After spending his whole afternoon trying to look for Xiuyun and coming back empty-handed, he went to the police station to file a report. The police, for their part, didn't have much enthusiasm for the case and barely even looked for Xiuyun while Laoliu returned home and waited for any news. On April 29th, some of the other villagers needed to meet with Laoliu for something. They went to his home, and just like with his brother before him, the door was open and the lights were turned on even though nobody was home. The villagers briefly searched for him, but when they couldn't find him, they decided to call his cell phone. The cell phone was however turned off, which was unusual and out of character for Laoliu. After failing to find any trace of him, his family reported him missing to the police. The police were completely blindsided and shocked when his family walked in to report him missing, because by all appearances it seemed the police themselves were the last to see Laoliu alive when he went to report his brother missing to them. Initially, Xiuyun's disappearance could have been dismissed as him running away to try and find better work outside his rural village. But his brother going missing only 2 days later was far more suspicious and finally motivated the police to conduct a proper investigation into the two cases. The local police called for assistance from neighboring villages so they could borrow officers to form a task force dedicated solely to investigating this case. On May 7th, that task force was formed. As mentioned above, Xiuyun had been living alone for 20 years and rarely had any contact with those outside his family. Laoliu was a different story. He was much more involved in the community as a farmer and working a few other odd jobs and side businesses, earning him many friends in the village. Since Laoliu had more of a social life and owned a cell phone which he frequently used, Xiuyun was again mostly the secondary focus, since police believed there would be a higher chance of tracking down Laoliu and that the two cases were likely connected anyway. The police obtained Laoliu's cell phone records and bills, which showed him calling many people until the day of his disappearance, when the calls suddenly stopped. Based on this, the police believed that Laoliu likely didn't intend to be away for long and that whatever caused his disappearance happened suddenly. After going through his phone records, the police took particular interest in one particular number in his contacts. This number Laoliu had called twice. Those two calls were made on April 29th, the day he went missing. That number was traced to 40-year-old Su Hong, the local doctor and the owner and operator of the village's medical clinic. Despite being married, Hong's marriage was not a happy one, so 9 years prior she moved back into her old, now deceased parents' home and had been living there alone except for the weekdays, where she lived with her 4 children, 3 of them adopted. The police went to question her at her home. Hong told the police that she once borrowed 5,000 yuan from Xiuyun in 2009 and another 10,000 from Laoliu in order to fund treatment for her children who had fallen ill in 2009. But according to Hong, she had already paid the brothers back. Upon questioning the other villagers, they confirmed that Hong did indeed borrow money from them, but all attested to Hong's good character. When Hong was asked to explain the calls, she said she called him in order to ask him to come over so she could return the money, and after he left she never saw him again. The police conducted a search effort next, attempting to find any bodies or something that would be out of place in the small village, such as strangers or vehicles not belonging to anyone. Both of these efforts came up empty-handed. The next 3 days of the investigation were largely fruitless until a new lead suddenly came to the police. On May 10th, Laoliu's sister was sent a text message from her brother. The message read as follows: "Let me be honest with you. I accidentally killed Big Brother. I said I was going to Shandong to find his son, and he got anxious, not letting us approach his son. Why is he like this? At that time, I had been drinking and got into it with him. He got up, so I pushed him, probably too hard. He didn't stand steady, and his head hit the door frame. When I checked, he had no pulse. I was scared, so I took care of Big Brother by moving the motorcycle. I was afraid of getting caught, so I left. The police then raided both of the brothers' respective homes for evidence, putting much emphasis on the search of Laoliu's property. Since the text message stated that Laoliu pushed Xiuyun and he hit his head against the door frame, that is where police and forensics concentrated their search. The police saw no signs of a struggle. Xiuyun's fingerprints couldn't be found and luminol tests revealed no blood on the doorframe. A search of the home itself also led to the police finding 3,000 yuan just lying around, which would have made no sense if Laoliu was fleeing and going on the run. By all accounts, it would appear that Laoliu didn't send that text and that this story was made up. Upon further examination of the text message, this seemed even more likely. Laoliu was not properly educated, made many typos, and didn't even know how to use punctuation marks. A stark contrast to this perfectly written text message with proper use of punctuation marks. After both the police and his family caught on to this, they decided to call his number only for no one to answer, as the phone was yet again turned off. The police further checked the phone and it made no calls, with its only use between April 30th and May 10th being to send that text message. Throughout the week, the phone would be turned back on and send the same text message 10 times to various different people, mostly his family members. This message did not add any real new insight and simply said, "I killed Big Brother. I feel awful. I can never come back again. I did it myself. It's unrelated to anyone else. I'm leaving. Take care of yourselves." Since these exonerating texts, including one in which Laoliu admitted to acting alone, came out not long after the police investigated Hong as their first suspect, the oddly convenient timing led to them once again investigating her. They were even more suspicious after one of Laoliu's other brothers told police that he had drunkenly told him that if I die, it will be Su Hong who kills me. On May 19th, the police returned to Hong's home to question her further. Hong had answered the police's questions calmly and matter-of-factly. When the police asked if she owned a cellar, however, Hong reacted a bit more panicked and denied owning a cellar. The police were skeptical of this, since in Heilongjiang almost every household owned a cellar to store food and vegetables over the winter, as Heilongjiang is one of China's most northernmost provinces. When the police began searching Hong's yard, sure enough, they did find a cellar entrance hidden under a pile of weeds. As soon as the police opened the entrance, they were instantly hit by a foul stench which made them know they were at the right place. The cellar had clearly been disused for a long while, and inside the police, even without entering, the police could see many empty plastic bags, clothing and human feces. Once Hong saw what they were doing, she became even more panicked and hastily ran over, attempting to block the police from investigating the cellar. The police mostly ignored her attempts and picked up a nearby rake from the ground to dig and poke away at the cellar from the outside. In so doing, they found two blue and green sheets that appeared to be brand new. The stench as well as the rotten feces meant that the police, when descending down into the cellar, had to wear gas masks, as the police suspected those two sheets indeed held corpses inside, which the police brought to the surface. The police opened the two sheets, and while they had been heavily decomposed, they were still able to recognize them as Xiuyun and Laoliu. Hong was swiftly arrested, and the news quickly spread to everyone in the village, who were in disbelief that Hong was the culprit, with many straight up refusing to believe it. According to the initial forensic examination, the two brothers had died of strangulation. After being interrogated, Hong confessed to the murders. Since she had recently borrowed money from Xiuyun and later Laoliu, the two often used paying off her debt as an excuse to visit her at her home and even clinic. And tragically, they also used this opportunity to sexually assault Hong and have her perform sexual favors in lieu of paying off her debt. As one may expect, Hong was miserable and saddened by this treatment and desperately sought a way out. She told police that life was worse day by day. On April 22nd, Xiuyun had apparently, according to some reports, fallen in love with a woman outside the village and was even going to marry her. So in preparation, Xiuyun decided to stop sexually assaulting and raping Hong under the condition that she pay her entire debt with interest. On April 26th, she invited Xiuyun over to her home so she could pay him back the money. Before Xiuyun arrived, she had crushed 16 sleeping pills in total into powder and stuffed them into 2 capsules. Once Xiuyun arrived, she convinced him to take the medicine by lying about it being Viagra. After he excitedly took it, he hastily passed out, and Hong seized this opportunity by grabbing a hemp rope and strangled Xiuyun to death with it. Afterwards, she rolled his body up in a sheet and tied that sheet down with rope. 3 days later, she used the same method to call Laoliu, lure him into his home and kill him in the same manner. Hong finished by disposing of both the brothers' bodies in the family cellar. Hong had confessed. The police saw nothing wrong with her confession and the brothers' bodies had been found. Only, the case wasn't over. The police felt something was odd as the brothers had both died relatively recently, but that cellar was still rancid and filled with human feces, so they thought something else was hidden down there. They were right to think so, as the officers still searching the cellar to clear it out and possibly find any more evidence such as the murder weapon, but they instead found a completely different human skeleton, fully skeletonized with no flesh or skin remaining. The skeleton belonged to a woman and the police quickly collected DNA samples from the remains and compared them to the families of any local missing person cases. The results quickly came back and they identified her as Su Hong's sister-in-law Li Xiuyun. After being interrogated for 2 days straight, Hong broke and finally confessed to her role in Xiuyun's death as well. Hong's background and life were understandably a large factor in these two murders. Hong was born in 1970 in Ning'an. She had both a younger brother and sister, so her parents instructed her to do most of the household chores. In school, Hong studied medicine and in 1986 she enrolled in Ning'an Health School and was assigned to work as an intern at the Second People's Hospital after her graduation. Her tenure at the hospital was a short one, as in 1990 she resigned in order to Xinghua village and opened a small clinic there. In 1994, she married her high school boyfriend. This was an unpopular decision and one criticized by her family, as she gave up a career for this wedding. After getting married, she moved into her husband's house in a different village. Their marriage wasn't meant to last, as her husband was almost immediately cheating on her with other women. Hong wanted to divorce him, but her parents talked her out of it. In this rural village, divorce was heavily frowned upon and it would likely ruin Hong's reputation and set her life back. Eventually, she fathered a child with her husband and Hong had hoped the birth of their child would fix their relationship, but instead, he didn't seem to care and left all the parenting to Hong. Eventually, when Hong's daughter was 9 months old, her husband left the village to go to work in the south of China. As he was the main provider and was now on practically the complete opposite side of China, Hong was left without a source of income, so she took her daughter and returned to Xinghua village, where she reopened her clinic upon her arrival. Hong's life didn't get any easier back home, since her siblings also left to go work in the south, meaning that Hong had to care for her parents, her nieces and nephews, her own daughter, and run the village's clinic at the same time. The clinic was not enough to provide for this many people, so eventually she was forced to use a tractor, work on the farm and do all the work normally delegated to the men of the village. In 2001, Hong learned from others that while working in southern China, her husband had started another affair with a local woman, moved in with her and even got her pregnant. This was the final straw for Hong, who divorced her husband and began to fully settle into her home in the village. In February of 2003, Hong's sister had returned home and sought out Hong and confided with her. It was here when she confessed to another unknown murder. Her sister was married to Yan Bingtao and told her that she wanted to divorce Bingtao. The two had recently gotten into an argument over something trivial, and Bingtao had escalated the argument by hitting and attacking her, with her rushing over to Hong's home not long after the beating. That next morning, Bingtao had been roaming the village looking for her and later found himself at Hong's home. Hong had her sister hide while she attempted to convince Bingtao to leave. After he refused to leave, an altercation broke out. In this argument, Bingtao threatened to harm his and his wife's children if Hong didn't return her to him. Seeing him on the ground made Hong decide to rid the village of him completely, so she picked up a beer bottle and hit Bingtao across the temple with it. Bingtao began to bleed heavily and writhed, struggled and twitched on the ground for 10 minutes before falling completely motionless. Even if most would have been offering Bingtao their sympathies, taking a life was still a heavily shocking and stressful event. She quickly called her father to tell her what happened and he arrived not long after. Her father didn't blame Hong and assured her that he would take care of the rest. Hong watched as her father dragged his body toward a nearby tractor and poured gasoline over it. He then covered the body with a pile of weeds and lit it. Hong didn't see what happened next. To finish off the murder, Hong used Bingtao's mobile phone to send a text message to his family explaining that he had left to go work in the south and would not be returning until he made enough money. This convinced his family so much that even in the 7 years between his murder and Hong's confession, nobody even reported him missing. In November of 2005, Xiuyun returned to the village after working in Ningbo in the Zhejiang province. The reunion started off poorly since Xiuyun started off by asking to borrow 10,000 yuan from Hong and got angry when she refused. Later that day, Hong heard from her mother that Xiuyun was having an affair which was smearing the family name. The cheating in particular angered Hong greatly. She decided to act upon this anger once Xiuyun went to sleep in her home. Hong got a piece of hemp rope and strangled Xiuyun before disposing of her body in the cellar. Afterwards, wrote a fake letter and snuck it into Xiuyun's family home. The letter stated that she had left the village for work with someone else and not to look for her. Her affair was common knowledge and the talk of the town, so nobody was suspicious or even looked for her. To better hide the bodies and smell, she would use the cellar to dispose of any garbage, dumping it in there and later shoveling up feces and dumping it in the cellar too. Hong's mother passed away in 2006 and her father in 2008, with his death resulting in the location of Bing Tao's remains being forever unknown. Hong likely would have never been caught if not for the Liu brothers actually having their disappearance properly investigated. Once the full story went public and was talked about on the news across China, many felt immense sympathy for Hong and were hoping she would get a lenient sentence, if any sentence at all. Hong, on the other hand, appeared to actually want the death penalty, telling the media that she would rather die than walk free and have everyone look at her and know what she did. The only thing she wondered was, why do men always treat me like this? In January of 2011, Hong's prosecution began and she was quickly found guilty. Hong made no attempt to defend herself, confessed to her crimes and went out of her way to express no remorse, urging the court to sentence her to death as soon as possible. The only thing Hong was concerned about was what would happen to her children afterwards. The Mudanjiang City Court of Heilongjiang Province granted Hong her wish and sentenced her to death. On February 10, 2012, Su Hong was executed. Subscribe for the next case, drop a comment to tell us what you think, and stay tuned. The story isn't over.